to help you relate better between the community and the police department and the community that they call the Grove. And since then, they have really worked on it. They looked at the police problem, but the chief there, Rich McLaughlin, he wanted to make the change. Okay, he just have retired, and they're doing a great job. Now, there's other areas that don't want to change. Okay,
sure.
So we have a little more.
Gotcha. So, President Ross, if you were the king for the day, what would be the top 3 things that you would recommend to your counterpart in Minneapolis in terms of how you can move forward? I mean, the incident has happened, the protests are still going on, the funerals have been held, the tears have been shed, and so now the question is, what now? What do you recommend in terms of these are the things that you should be seeking in terms of healing and reform and future operations? What would you recommend if they came to you and said, we want to hear from you?
Well, one, I would, and they already done it. They invited the NAACP in to work with the police chief. Listen very carefully to all sides, and then third, start to piece together a approach on how you're going to resolve the issue. But they have to really listen, and I think a lot of times that it will be to listen, okay, to build a relationship, and then to come up with some solution to the issue. And I think that the solution is people just want to be treated fair. Mm-hmm. Anybody you try to say the black community, that's where we got the most problem. But a lot of times they don't listen. One of the things that I would like to see is the first 90 days that the officer finished the academy. And for the first 90 days he's out on the street, he doesn't have a weapon. He now has only his badge and the nightstick. Now he has to build a different kind of relationship, and he may then understand what's going on. Well, so those things.
Well, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get ready to go to a break, but when we get back, we want to hear from you just in terms of some of your recommendations and some of the other things that you have going on in your jurisdiction, so that perhaps some of our listeners, and we have listeners all over the world and all over the country, maybe some things that you talk about maybe can help out someone else. And then also we have Dr. Albright on the phone because on the line, on the conversation, because the protests have been hot and heavy. And as we're going to discuss when we get back from the break, this issue was something near and dear, unfortunately, to many people's existence and experience, for thousands of people to march in close quarters, to take tear gas and all the other things that people did in the middle of a pandemic. So we certainly want to hear from Dr. Albright, just in terms of, okay, now that all this is going on, what's that going to do to the pandemic? What should people be doing to, protect themselves now that they've been exposed to it? All those questions you wanted to ask, wanted to know, but were afraid to ask. So we ask that you stay right there and listen up, because we'll be right back for some great information.
Radio. We never dilute the issues. We serve the hard stuff.
Anyone else?
My name is David, and in 8 years, I'll be an alcoholic.
Hi, David.
I'll start drinking in middle school, just at parties. But my parents won't start talking to me about it till high school. And by then, I'll already be in some trouble.
Kids who drink before age 15 are 5 times more likely to have alcohol problems when they're adults.
The thing is, my parents won't even see it coming.
So start talking.
Who's next?
Before they start drinking.
I just remembered it's election day. Are you going to vote?
I don't know. I don't think I'll have time today.
Millions of eligible voters in America never make it to the polls or even register to vote. When you don't vote, you're letting other people make decisions for you and pick the things your taxes will pay for. Voting is more than a civic duty. It gives you a voice about the priorities and the future of your community and our nation. Voting gives you a seat at the table.
Started at a party, everyone was there. She had a couple pills on a little dare, but now she's missing class and she's dropping her pom-poms. Nobody knows where she is, not even her mom. Everybody thought she was the all-American girl. So there goes the books, it's all about the score. There goes the doggy, life is such a bore. There goes the family, she's got a new friend. There goes the looks, this is the end. I guess she really was the all-American girl.
Pick up heroin and you'll throw away everything you love. Share your stories on Instagram with #heroin.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in physics, I learned that I'm a loser.
Today in school, I learned that I'm ugly and useless. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. In history, I learned that I'm trash.
Today in school, I learned that I have no friends. In English, I learned that I make people sick. And at lunch, I learned that I sit on my own because I smell. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me.
In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. And in math, I learned that I'm trash.
The only thing I didn't learn in school today?
The only thing I didn't learn today?
The only thing I didn't learn?
Is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov. A message from the Ad Council.
Straight No Chaser Talk Radio. Other shows water down the issues. We only serve the hard stuff. Straight No Chaser Talk Radio.
Long since I've been with my Straight No Chaser family, but I'm excited to be here. First, I wanted to say thank you to our guests that we have on the line. I was listening to the first half, and that was a lot of valuable information. And, you know, me being my age, I'm out here on the front lines of all of this. So to hear the perspective of how history has been repeating itself and the things that need to happen and where this thing looks like it's going, it's been very interesting to hear that and pretty interesting. Somewhat encouraging, but mostly interesting. But with that being said, Dr. Albright, I know you are on the line, and, you know, obviously I told my parents I'm done protesting. I've kind of taken a back seat, and I'm educating my peers in my community about law and procedure. So that when they go out here to these front lines, they have an agenda, or at least an idea of an agenda. But I did protest for a couple of days, and obviously COVID-19 is not dead. It is still alive and well. So what do you think about the fact that all these people are out here and they are, you know, skin to skin for this cause? And with that being said, what are the best preventive measures that people can take to try to protect themselves while being out here on the front lines?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm very conflicted, or as I was watching, I was very conflicted because I was very much in support of the protests and the reason for the protests. However, as a healthcare professional, I was really concerned about the faces that I saw that were unmasked and they were not practicing the social distancing. And one thing you always remember is in any situation where there's passion involved, you lose a lot of the common sense protective effects that people would normally do. And so, and as passionate as a demonstration is, you know that in most cases, or in a lot of cases, people forego their usual common sense measures like, hey, don't forget, even though we're protesting, this is a pandemic and Corona is all around us. So, you know, make sure you take a mask. What I would have liked to have seen is I heard there were people passing out snacks and water and stuff like that. I wish they would have been passing out masks.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting that you said that because, Chief, I don't know if you remember me sharing this story, but there were actually people in Oakland, California, who tried to send boxes of protest masks out to different cities, and they were actually confiscated by the U.S. Postal Service and the federal agents. They would not even allow them to ship them.
Well, that's not unusual for the government that we're living under. I'm sure that that message of somebody trying to send masks out to protesters probably got to Washington and it probably was shot down. You know, I mean, that would be a person who would be not interested in protecting protesters who are practicing their constitutional right of protest. So that doesn't surprise me. It's just unfortunate because that's what I was thinking of all those young people out there unprotected for a very good cause. But, you know, it's up to the level-headed, more mature adults to say, hey, okay, protest with this mask on, you know, or protest, but if you can, stay away, you know, be conscious that you could get sick and we're trying to keep you healthy. So maybe you don't want to be right up on people. Maybe you want to get outside the main group or on the outskirts so that you can be there and protest, but you're keeping yourself as safe as possible. Because like Mr. Ross said, you know, the most important thing is human life. And so we want to preserve that at all costs. And even though I agree with the protesters, I would just say, let's protest in a smart way.
Now, do you think that the masks are enough protection?
Well, one thing I've been really perplexed by is the fact that everything I hear says that the mask is not to protect you, it's to prevent you from giving the infection to someone else. However, it's absurd for people not to realize that if your mouth and nose are covered, then you aren't going to get it from anybody else either. Right. And I don't know why that message has only been one-sided, because it kind of gives people the impression that there's nothing you can do to protect you, but you can protect your grandmother and your aunts and uncles from getting it. But that's not true. You contact the virus from your nose and mouth. And if your nose and mouth is covered, then you be very unlikely to get the disease, or at least you're doing as best you can not to contract it. Right. So I don't understand why that double message, not only you're protecting the community, but you're protecting yourself as well. That's what the message should be.
Gotcha. Now, Mr. Ross, I also wanted to ask you a quick question, and then I'll turn it back over to the chief. But I heard you kind of reflect on previous protests, especially in the 60s. And do you see this wave of protests, everything that's going on now, do you see this being more effective than back then? Because, you know, the one thing that bothers me is that here we are years later and we're still fighting for basically the same reason. Not exactly the same reason. I mean, obviously, we're not fighting for Jim Crow to go away or anything like that, but we're still out here fighting for Black lives.